Gracious and loving God, may the words that I speak bring all honor and glory to you. Amen. Well, good morning, St. Patrick's family. So good to be back with you, week 3 of our 4-week journey together through this passage in Colossians. But let's get to first things first. How was that cake? Right, it was all right. It's pretty good. I liked it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And because I'm going to start there actually this morning. All right. We're now into the section of this Colossians passage which begins with seeing that you have stripped off the old self with its practices and have clothed yourself with the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge according to the image of its creator. So that's a little bit of a word salad there at the end. So I'm going to slow down and open it up a bit, and I'm going to do that by jumping onto the word knowledge for a minute. We have knowledge when we can represent something as it actually is, based on appropriate thought and experience. It is not the same as education. For instance, I can read a lot about chocolate cake but never make one. It's only after I have made one or two or many more that I have knowledge of chocolate cake. Then after you've eaten it, you can decide whether or not I have enough knowledge. That's when knowledge confers confidence and trust. If you enjoy the cake, then you trust that I know what I'm talking about when I talk about chocolate cake. But it's only through this experience that we come to trust. Simple education rarely confers the same level of trust. That's why, as we've gone along this journey with one another, I've asked you to try certain things on your own. Through personal interaction and experimentation with God, you will come to have knowledge. In the final lines of the book of the prophet Hosea, you find the words, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge." Not a lack of faith, a lack of knowledge. It's that important. Which brings us back to Paul's line here, which is your new self, which we've been working on for a few weeks, is being renewed in knowledge according to the image of its creator. Your new self, the one we've been working on, is being renewed as you come to experience life that is available through becoming a student of Jesus. The image of your new self is Jesus. Jesus is being formed in you. Your new self is the same self that inhabited Jesus. Can you imagine that? Can you get your mind around that for a minute? That kind of power, that ability, that connection to God and other people, it's alive in you now, and it is renewed as you go along. The more you know, the more knowledge you have, the more you take on his character. That's what knowledge in the Bible is referring to. Interactive relationship, not book learning. Remember, we have knowledge when we can represent things as they actually are based on appropriate thought and experience. But what things are we representing? Well, first and foremost, it's life in the kingdom of God. Our new life begins to manifest a new kind of reality that other people can see and we feel in our simple day-to-day activity, people will begin to comment that you seem different. And we will feel different because now we're in the flow of God's purpose for life. The way life is meant to be, the real reality, not the one the world is pushing on us. So the things that we're representing is the life God meant for us to live, and it's available to everyone, no matter what the specific circumstances you find yourself in. There is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave and free, but Christ is all and in all. We live in an age when identity politics is all the rage, where there's an intense focus on claiming a specific marker and clinging to it as if that will ultimately make a difference. Jesus, Paul, and I am telling you that that is a house built on sand. It may serve a person well for a moment, but a storm always comes and knocks those things down. The only safe place to stand for the human being is in their identity as a beloved child of God. I'm old enough now to have attempted to live in multiple houses built on sand. Texan, artist, former Texan, food service worker, fiance, husband, father, writer, teacher, church worker, bankrupt, recovering, failure, successful, number one, nobody, preacher, pastor, teacher, good friend, bad friend, tennis player, tennis failure, chocolate cake maker, and on and on and on. Every one of those identities is temporary. Only one is eternal. Beloved child of God. And no matter what happens to me, what circumstances I find myself in, no one and nothing can alter that fact. And it is true of everybody. So we come to the next line, which is, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved. Chosen. God chose you for something spectacular. Chose you to do something that only you can do right in the place where He has placed you at this moment. You have been inserted into history to do something that only you can do. In your family, in your workplace, as a friend, as somebody standing in line at Starbucks, you have been uniquely empowered and enabled to be a touch point between heaven and earth in that moment in a way that only you can do. You have been chosen. Holy. You may not wake up in the morning and go, "Ooh, I feel holy today." You might often feel opposite. But that is not a true view of you. God made you holy. That's part of your identity. It is a power you can manifest anywhere you are. You have to choose it. You have to choose it. It's like a gear shift, right? For those of us who can still drive a stick shift, you kind of have to put the clutch in and grab the stick and go. But it's there. Holy. It's always there. It's a choice you make. And what does that holiness run on? It runs on the third word here, which is beloved. There's nothing you can do or not do, nothing you can say or not say to remove yourself from your beloved position in God's vision. That's how God sees you. And by leaning into that belovedness, you have the power to grab the stick shift and be holy. Now, after last week's Paul put to death list, he gets a little more positive and he gives us an add-on list. And what a list it is. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against one another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. So I don't have time to dig in on the entire list as much as I would love to, so I'm just going to highlight the two biggest. The first and the last on Paul's list: compassion and forgiveness. In the kingdom of God, which is ruled by love, compassion and forgiveness are the coins of the realm. They are what we must exchange with each other daily in order for things to go as they should. So, because you know nobody loves a gimmick more than me, today I brought coins. They're going to be in a basket in the back as you leave. On one side of the coin, as you can see, I've written the letter C for compassion. On the other side of the coin, I've written the letter F. My hope is you're going to pick one of these coins up as you leave today, and I'm going to leave you with a little practice here in a minute. But for now, keep this in mind. Let's talk about compassion for a second. C. Compassion is a feeling that pulls you out of your comfort zone and into someone else's discomfort zone. For example, one of the quickest things that we can come to is the idea of a lost child. It's almost impossible for any adult, when they see a child who has been separated from their mother in a crowd, not to feel a tremendous pull to get involved, to comfort the child, to reconnect them to their parents or guardian, to leave behind whatever they were doing and help. I know this from firsthand experience. As a little kid, and I was probably 3 or 4 years old, in San Angelo, Texas, I went to a department store with my mother called Hempel Wells. And back in those days, shirts and sweaters and whatnot were laid out on a kind of a low-lying counter, and underneath that counter were drawers filled with multiple sizes of whatever that shirt or sweater was. Well, while my mother was shopping, I decided to pull one of the drawers open and maybe rearrange a couple of things. It was very intense work. And I was entirely focused on it, so much so that I did not notice that my mother had wandered away. When I discovered that I was by myself, I did what most kids would do, and I burst into tears. A clerk clearly heard me. I remember her so vividly in my imagination. She came over to me, she took my hand, she said very quietly, "Let's go find your mommy." Wasn't a big place, didn't take long. I was reunited with my mother. Encased in that small exchange with that store clerk is the definition of compassion. She saw something, she got involved, and she reunited us. Now, she also demonstrates a couple of things that are really important. Calm, non-anxious presence, and our shared identity. She knew what it was like to be lost. We recognize each other in compassion. Compassion is a feeling that we can sit in, but it is meant to be a catalyst. It should ignite an action and put us in service of another. What I'm here to tell you is that there is a lost child placed in front of you almost every day. The only thing is, they are often hidden underneath a label or an appearance that will make you uncomfortable. What God does by placing that lost child in front of you is to lure you out of your own sense of safety into a larger and more adventurous life. Jesus saw the entire world through the eyes of compassion. It was his character. He was a compassionate person. Are you? I'm afraid to say that I am not. If I'm being entirely truthful about myself, my first reaction when I see some person that might pull me out of my well-constructed comfort zone is to ask myself, how can I avoid this person? Don't I have more important things to do? Then I do my best to make a wide circle around that person, all the while constructing an airtight rationalization about how that was the right thing to do. Jesus never does that. He jumps right in. There's nothing more important to him than the need that presents itself in the moment, and he engages whatever power he has to help. Now, in his case, that's a lot of power. In our case, we can be certain that we also have been given enough to contribute to the good of whomever we encounter. We can't make it perfect, but we can certainly make it better. Brennan Manning says this: our culture says that ruthless competition is the key to success. Jesus says that ruthless compassion is the purpose of our journey. But in order to do that, in order to engage the kind of compassion Jesus displayed, I'm going to need the trust that I talked about earlier. I'm going to need to trust that God is going to provide everything I need. So if I choose to cash in the compassion coin, I need to be confident that God is my partner in that transaction. If I attempt it alone, then look out. I'll be tempted to see the outcome of my compassion through the lens of success or failure. I'll feel good about what happened, or I might feel like I failed. But if I'm partnering with God in that act of compassion, then the outcome is always in her hands. A great burden is lifted. I am no longer the one that makes things happen. I am simply a vehicle that delivers God's love to another person. Now, this takes practice. You have to go through this cycle a few times before you gain the kind of trust I'm talking about. And as I just said, I'm still working on it. But I can tell you that as I engage compassion more and more, I gain knowledge that I can rely on and trust when I step in to cash my compassion coin. And that compassion coin is going to be very helpful when we turn it over and use the forgiveness side. Forgiveness is the ability to extend it to others and ourselves, and is so important to God. He places it as the final action Jesus takes before his death. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. That kind of forgiveness in such extreme circumstances seems almost impossible to us. For a long time, it seemed that way to me. until it happened to me. And here, for better or worse, I have knowledge. Here's that important word again. This story is hard for me to tell, and so I'm going to ask for your forgiveness in advance if I become overly emotional, but I think you will see the value in it. I grew up in a very violent household, full of alcohol and anger. And what I suffered under the hands of my parents was significant over a long period of time. But because of the time and place where I grew up, I actually thought that was reality. I thought that's the way everybody lived. After moving away and being awakened to the fact that not everybody was going through that, I became very, very angry. And obviously and naturally, the relationship with my parents disintegrated once I knew what life was supposed to be like. Then, as time went along, and I began to encounter a very thoughtful and helpful therapist and other thoughtful and helpful friends, I decided it was time to engage my parents about what had happened to me. That was going to be an important part of my healing. And so I went forward and I decided to talk to my mother face to face about what I had endured at her hand as a child. I took an extraordinary amount of anger into that, but very low expectations. I needed her to hear the truth from my POV. I needed to have spoken it at least once, and I figured that would be the end of the ballgame. I sat with her, I looked her in the face, and I said, "This is what happened to me. This really happened. And it was bad, and it is hard on me, and it is hard on our relationship." And then she spoke 4 words. She said, "I'm sorry that happened." And that was all she said. But I am telling you that for me, that moment was Paul on the road to Damascus, a lightning strike. Something happened inside of me at that moment that was so mysterious and so supernatural that the forgiveness flowed through me and onto her, and our relationship restarted from that moment forward. Now, I'm not a big forgive and forget guy. I'm not. I have not forgotten what I suffered. But the power of forgiveness that flowed through me at that moment was outside of my hands. Something happened. And from that moment forward, our relationship began to be renewed. We were in a new place. I will say, as an addendum to that, my father was not interested in having that conversation. And although we got along, our relationship was not renewed in the same way. As I said before, compassion and forgiveness is an exchange. That is the coin of the realm. We are passing things back and forth that are really important to one another. Now, forgiveness is a relationship restart. It means a continual practice of taking the person in front of us and treating them as a new thing, not punishing them for past mistakes. In order to do that, we have to turn the coin over again and extend them some compassion. Move out of our comfort zone so that something that was broken can be mended. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it can be better. The word religion comes from the Latin word religare, which means to repair something that was formerly broken. We often hear people say that they are spiritual but not religious. Well, I say I am deeply religious. Because what I thought was broken and could not be repaired ultimately was. Because of the power of compassion, forgiveness, and grace. And if it could happen for me, it can happen for you. So this week, take this coin, put it somewhere where you can see it clearly early in your day. And if you are feeling particularly whimsical, you can flip it. And if it lands on F, intentionally seek out some place to exercise forgiveness in your day. If it lands on C, go looking for that lost child that God's going to place in front of you today and get involved. And remember, it doesn't need to be perfect in order to be better. Amen.